What's up, guys? So for the past how long at the start of regular Q&As have I been saying, oh, we're going to do a super Q&A. Today, we have a super Q&A. This is the series where I take questions from people on Patreon who are guaranteed to get a response no matter what the topic's on. Often these videos run longer than the regular Q&As and end up with more personal or obscure kind of questions. So let's jump in. I actually put up this post allowing people to submit questions for this way back in December. However, to my credit, we did already get through a few of these. Let's just keep rolling it out and pretend this didn't get out really late. Okay, so the next question comes from Ruben, who says, it might be a little early to think about this stuff, but in what ways would you change Guild Wars 2 so it would remain playable after the launch of a potential Guild Wars 3 in the future? Guild Wars 1 had the most notable change of being able to have 7 hero parties instead of just 4 at the launch of Nightfall, making it possible to solo almost all the content, excluding the 12-man elite missions from factions. In my opinion, it would be very hard to change Guild Wars 2 in a way that stuff like world bosses cannot be completed just because of the lack of people. How would fractals and raids, and maybe even dungeons, RIP may you never be forgotten, look if the game has a lot less people playing it? Will the Heart of Thorns and Living World Season 2 maps even continue to function since they require a lot of people? This is a really interesting question. It touches on a lot of interesting aspects of both games, actually. First of all, the world boss idea in Guild Wars 2, I actually don't foresee that being a huge problem. A lot of the world bosses exist in sub-level 80 maps. If we're talking about vanilla game at the moment, sub-level 80 maps, and because you're scaled up a little bit, they're actually more than possible to solo. Some of them are a little bit more detailed than that, and that you can't really, for example, Triple Trouble Worm to Quattle, and especially when we get into expansion areas, but it's not crazy to solo Tide of Covington, or even two-man Tide of Covington. And I wonder whether the game will ever get so dead that you can't find a single other person to play. I mean, as long as you as a human being are a social creature that has a single friend in the world, I think that opens up a lot of the content. But then, yeah, you do start to run into problems with these large metas in general. Let's move away from the term boss and just go to the term metas. These metas that we find in the expansion areas and presumably future expansions too, even though I do think future expansions, by the way, will have less focus on big metas like that. They'll probably have a mix of core vanilla stuff and big meta stuff. But I think these will continue to be a staple of Guild Wars 2. And yeah, like, you can't solo the Silver Waste. Well, technically, I suppose, if you spent ages, you could proc the Breach, but then you're probably not getting any further than that. So yeah, how does that work? You know, I thought you were going to say just more simple stuff like, oh, hey, dungeons. And the funny thing is, actually, you can kind of solo a lot of those dungeons. Even finally, to look at Guild Wars 1, you know, you cite heroes. People that don't know this, heroes are fully customizable AI characters that fill party slots for you when you can't play with other real people, which is now, in an increasingly dead game such as Guild Wars 1, very important. Even before the heroes, there were henchmen. And you mentioned in Guild Wars 1 the 12-man content, and you can't have 12 or 11 heroes with you, so just so these places don't count. But even there, you will find, if you guys sub to the Guild Wars 1 subreddit, it's pretty interesting if you're ever a fan of that game to see it, even though it's slow moving. You know, people will post, oh, hey, yeah, I did the Deep today with just a hero team with only 8 players in my party. But that kind of stuff still can be done. You can do pretty much everything. So then you get to Guild Wars 2. If they move away from Guild Wars 2, start producing other things, and not just produce other things, but spend a majority company focus on it so they can no longer update Guild Wars 2, what do you do with the game? Well, it kind of needs a lot of systems right in place. Like, what's the easiest way to tackle this problem? Do you then, yes, give players some kind of equivalent of a hero system in Guild Wars 2 again? It's an interesting idea because it's totally alien to much of what Guild Wars 2 is right now, but we know in the engine they can have allies follow you around. We know that the earliest design concepts, whether this is worth very much as a point of discussion, we know that the earliest design concepts for the game actually did include this idea that you would always have one companion, one AI companion with you at all times that eventually got scrapped. We know Guild Wars 2 is based on the Guild Wars 1 engine, which also had heavy functionality for that. So can they add some kind of a hero henchman system? I would say they kind of have to, right? Like, what other solutions are there? It's either that, or to go into every bit of content you've ever made and fundamentally change the way some of it works. Like the Breach, you would have to fundamentally change the way that encounter plays out, all the scaling associated with it, remove the, you know, the time restrictions on many of these bosses and encounters, and tweak things like that. And then how would, like, the Gerent work, right? The Gerent is just one meta event that would have to completely change, and then what does that mean for all the other meta events just like it? It's really interesting. So I think you'd have to go the hero henchman route. Or I mean, if you've moved away from your game, why do you need to keep supporting it, I suppose? I'm personally as pessimistic as that comment I just came out with. I'm personally in the camp that you should continue supporting it. I actually think one of the best things... this is a real layman, stupid, almost baseless comment for me to make. I feel like one of the best ways ArenaNet can make a quick buck out of, you know, a small team of like 5 devs, even less than that, right, would be to dedicate them wholly on Guild Wars 1 content again. I know that sounds crazy, but I honestly think that if you had a small team of devs like the old team that John Stummy and so on were a part of, producing Beyond style content, even if it's slow, you would have a much higher retention of Guild Wars 1 players, much higher amount of players interested in trying out Guild Wars 1 during Guild Wars 2's lulls. It would prevent a significant, in my opinion, amount of toxicity that the community feels when we get into content droughts. It would actually be really good for the game. I would love to see them do that. And in the event that the same thing happened with Guild Wars 2, they move off to Guild Wars 3 or whatever else, yeah, I'd like a tiny little bit of support to continue going. I do think that that's worthwhile for the devs as a company. And then the other thing I've mentioned in a couple of other videos that I think would be really cool, and they should do it if they go to a Guild Wars 3 eventually as well, which I think the chance is almost 0, by the way. They should do like what Battle.net does with Blizzard. You should do a joint, since the accounts are already connected, you should do a joint chat between the accounts. How cool would it be if in Guild Wars 2 you could open your friends list and there was a whole other little section there showing who was online in Guild Wars 1 as well, and their location in Guild Wars 1, and you could chat to people across the 250 years. Come on, that would be amazing. Obviously, it would be fun, and it's easy to say the accounts are connected anyway, but there's probably some ridiculous, you know, back-end server jumps that someone would have to make that just makes this kind of idea impossible, but it would be fun, and, you know, stuff like shared achievement points between both games would also have been fun. But hey. Anyway, so yeah, really interesting idea. How would Guild Wars 2 continue to exist if ArenaNet just moved away from it altogether? It would take a lot of hammering to do that. A lot. Maybe that's a sign that that may never happen. It's Guild Wars 2 is going to be supported until the day they let it roll down and the servers turn off. Next question is from Menace Tekat, who said, "Hey WP, I've got a question. Guild Wars 2 likes to stress the living world angle, but as we've seen, and you've pointed out the inconsistencies of old/new lines, Arch, Fort Salma, etc., there are many problems with having a static story dropped into an evolving world. I started thinking about Guild Wars 1 updates, and I remembered the books wherein you could play historical content, like Gwen's escape from the Char, and I wondered why it wouldn't make more sense for the personal story to be completely instanced. Such a change would allow them to keep the story at a certain point in history, and, more importantly, it would allow them to overhaul the personal story to give it the depth that it deserves without painting themselves into a corner. I'm not suggesting that people would have to go from 1 to 80 in instances before getting into the open world, and through however many seasons may have occurred, but it seems like they need to delineate story from open world. What would be great is if in your home instance you could go to a bookseller and look at your adventures from personal story to season 1, 2, etc. Ideally, every book would open an instance where you live out that bit of lore, much like we did with Kaith in Season 2. I hope Season 3 they give more depth. The series is enough breadth for the moment. Oh, and I hope you get to a point where you can move out. Happy Winter's Day. See, people are talking about Winter's Day. Oh, and I found Marjorie and Casimir's house in Divinity's Reach. Would you suggest for a housewarming gift? Okay, so there's so much to talk about here. First of all, yes, actually, this month is when I'm moving out. It's going to be great. People over there on Patreon are going to be getting a lot of posts and blogs and things about this coming up very soon. But so to the main question, I actually kind of disagree in a lot of ways. I really don't. I already feel that Guild Wars 2's personal story is too heavily instanced. I really have come to detest the amount of separation you as a player experience, because if you choose to play personal story, you are going into a little instance, and then you're going into another arbitrary little instance, and then another, and then another, and then another, and it's like just so formulaic and clockwork and lame. And Heart of Thorns was formulaic too, but I really, really, really enjoyed the way that in Heart of Thorns, they said, okay, we have this map in the jungle, this map is frozen in time, this map will always make sense with the narrative of the story of this expansion, so we are free to keep people in the open world, we are free to keep people exploring and meeting one another, and having that dialogue pop integrated throughout the exploration of the jungle was fantastic. Again, I will say that the quality of the personal story was really, really, really good. What they actually created, ArenaNet, was several notches up from core, the launch personal story. The problems with Heart of Thorns story was how short it was and how that lack of length constrained it in terms of its story arcs, and then everything everything felt suddenly rushed and then suddenly unfulfilled, and then it was just kind of crap. It was really just the length that made it suffer. I really liked the way they incorporated more open world in. So I do think I disagree on a fundamental level that we need more instancing. And I also think that, yes, there are inconsistencies out there. So that everyone's on the same page, what we're talking about here is you are in the middle of the Zaitan personal story, you go to Fort Salma, and you see it's been attacked by Morgemoth, and you're suddenly very aware that these weird time skips are going on around. That may be true that that's happening, but I also think that the problem has been severely lessened now that they can have the streaming client and they can have dedicated instances that are frozen in time. See, the biggest problem when I complained about this more was back when you would go into an instance in the personal story in Lion's Arch and you're supposed to be in the fight against Zaitan. Or, you know, it's supposed to be happy-go-lucky, I'm just hanging around with the Order of Whispers escorting Tybalt dressed as a woman, and yet the Breachmaker is assaulting Lion's Arch and everything's in chaos. Those were the really huge problems. The issue with the fort in Timberline Falls now is kind of lessened. Yes, when you first go there, you can see Morgemoth's vines, but you head into the instance, and it's quite clear then that all the vines have gone away, and you're back to the regular fort, and it's kind of okay from that point on. So I think that this, as well, is going to become even less of an issue as we go forward, especially with regard to expansions, because what they did with Heart of Thorns is essentially perfect to me, right? When they release, say, the Crystal Desert with another expansion, they're probably going to do the same thing. They're going to say, all right, these Crystal Desert maps probably aren't going to change majorly with Living World updates. The Living World updates are probably going to change other areas of the world, and you will forever be in dynamic events, meta events, around NPCs who are talking, and all frozen in that point of the story in time, and it will all stay like that. And I think that because they're probably going to adopt that strategy, there's really not such a necessity to instance things even further out. The bonus mission pack was cool in Guild Wars 1, but I don't think it's necessary to do something like that in Guild Wars 2. I think the last place ArenaNet are going to have real issues with this is Ore. And Ore may need some kind of special case, unique, tailored solution for it, such as until you complete the personal story, you can never access the new cleansed Ore maps or something like that, something quite extreme, something like that. Either they'll have to go to those lengths, or they will just ignore Ore forevermore. I mean, they seem to be struggling with so many other basic things. Ore is probably on the back burner for them right now, too. I'm curious, though, what you guys think, because I do see what you're saying. All right, anyway, so moving on. Kevin P. Smith said, WP, I'm a bit disappointed that you do not produce videos concerning World vs. World. Can you outline the exact reasons why? Are there any conditions you could foresee that would draw you into World vs. World? Apparently there is a World vs. World overhaul coming soon. Do you expect to produce anything concerning that? World vs. World is a drama-rich community which offers a large amount of heartbreak and elation. It may be too much of a bite off to chew for the workload you currently carry. Would you ever consider taking on a World vs. World specific reporter to provide periodic updates to your general audience concerning the state of World vs. World? Okay, I understand thoroughly people's desire to see me produce World vs. World content, especially when you see me as this utility thing wherein you kind of use me for general information about the game. It does seem kind of lame that I just neglect to talk about one of the whole sections altogether. My reasons for this, I think, are quite straightforward. Now, one of the things I would say I draw most flack from people, I don't think really what I do on the internet can get people that angry, right? Like I just talk about a video game. But one of the things I do get flack from people about is I tend to be dismissive about the community when I personally don't relate to their problems. And I'll go on videos and I'll explain why I don't relate to that problem. And people will think it's bunk. People will very quickly point the fanboy finger or the, hey, you've just been bought by ArenaNet finger. Wooden Potatoes doesn't talk about World vs. World because he doesn't want people to realize that the game actually sucks. But the truth is, it's none of that stuff, really. Even though I can fully appreciate that World vs. World is in a bad place, if I can't really get behind that and genuinely care an awful lot about it, I'm not going to pretend I do, just to pander to people in the audience and pretend like it's somehow near and dear to my heart. The fact that World vs. World is broken sucks. It drags a third of the game down and it has caused us huge population issues, and that has not been good for Guild Wars 2. I appreciate this as a fact, but am I personally involved with this fact? No. Outside of the damage its failure has done to the game as a whole, which I've always mentioned on videos, I don't care that World vs. World is broken, because World vs. World is at such a low, abysmal state for me, I hardly even see the value in it in the first place. I have tried World vs. World. I'm ranked 600, I've spent some time at least in there, and I've tried both roaming and playing in large based stuff. I have both blobbed and I have done organized stuff. I've not done copious amounts of these things, but what I have found as an individual is the way that World vs. World is structured, it doesn't really appeal to me. Roaming, to me, has always felt kind of pointless whether you kill someone or you don't. You know, you may go out there and eventually get a really cool 1v1 build and end up winning a lot of your 1v1s, but the thrill of that wanes very quickly for me, especially the downtime. Especially now, with all the population balance issues in World vs. World, the downtime between finding actual fights has always frustrated me. The fact that most people you'll find when you're roaming, or at least looking for small fights or flipping little camps, are going to be thieves who will nearly always just SR and then walk off, depending on the build you're playing. The expense that goes into build crafting and trying out fun things in World vs. World also drags me down, so I've never really enjoyed that too much. Blobbing, I used to enjoy blobbing when the game first came out, because, oh, look, giant numbers and huge, massive battles, but then that gets old very quickly, and it just kind of feels like a bit of a loot fest, and I don't feel any server pride, and I don't really see how my little battle here has really affected the global fight, the global matchup, sorry. And as for organized stuff, maybe it's because I haven't done enough. This is the bit that will probably anger people. I have never found that it is that tactical or that interesting from the experiences I've had. I'm more than open to accept there could be more interesting things, especially well-organized GVGs. I've never really seen too much of that, and I think that there could be more depth there. But my experience on the several occasions I've tried to do organized stuff, it's essentially just boiled down to hearing one guy call out general directions for people to move, me standing on a tag, while some people call big water, small water, veil, and, you know, other generic small things like that. My general level of engagement and enthusiasm for it, as in the roles I've played, has not been that great. So there's just no part of World vs. World I've ever really cared about. And yes, I get it. Other people do. Other people really, really hate the state that World vs. World, and I think it's a shame, and I've not hidden from that. I'll say it in videos that it sucks, but I'm not going to pretend to have an opinion that I don't. I think that would be the disingenuous thing. I think me going on and slamming my fist on the table and ranting at ArenaNet about how World vs. World is, just because I know, you know, the World vs. Worlders in my audience will enjoy that. I think that's unfair. I think what you should have is someone who's genuinely passionate rant about those things, and you can't look at me if I'm so far off of the table with World vs. World that enthusiasm isn't there in the first place. And I get it, right? The question probably wasn't so much asking me to be negative about World vs. World, but just to talk about it in general. Well, even if I was into it, which I'm not, and hopefully I've explained why, I can't ever really see myself doing a video saying, oh, guys, the Gandara versus X versus Y matchup is going like this, because I wouldn't be a part of one of those servers. I wouldn't care about inter-guild drama or what people have been echo chambering around with themselves in their private team speaks. I wouldn't really care about that stuff. I can't be that invested in it. The most you'd ever get is me very invested in my own server, and even then I think it's too personal, too specific, wouldn't hit a big enough demographic, and it makes it hard to talk about World vs. World. This entire discussion I've had may have felt a little bit long, but I'll just say this general sentiment I carry through to every part of Guild Wars 2 and every type of content I create. If there is a big problem in the game, but it doesn't affect me, I would rather announce that it's there, but not linger on it for too long, because I don't think fostering negativity when I don't share the enthusiasm for that negativity is a particularly fun way to conduct my life and to affect the comments that appear in all the videos and what I get barraged with. You guys have to understand, if I talk about a topic, like recently where I talked about the cancellation of the Legendary, something very near and dear to me, or more specifically, Mike's ideas about the size of expansions and so on, if I do something like that, I get hammered from hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people in all my comments about this one particular topic, and it can be very draining if all you do is foster negativity. So if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it about something I genuinely care about. All right, and so then the other side of the World vs. World stuff, yes, an update's coming, and yes, I do think there are elements of that game type that really do appeal to me. I've always liked the PvE, VP style nature of World versus World, and I definitely think there is an iteration of World versus World that can bring me and many other people back to it, and I have my eye on it. Don't take this as me saying, oh, I will never cover World versus World stuff. I will try it, and I will give ArenaNet a shot every time they put out a patch for it until eventually it molds itself into something I'm having a lot of fun with. And when that happens, you guys will see content on it. That's basically the way it goes for me. Next question is from Sue, who said, if ArenaNet asked you to create the next elite specialization on any class, what would you create? Which new weapon or existing brand new would this elite spec have access to? And most importantly, what would the lore behind this specialization be? Oh, don't ask me this. Some of the best stuff we ever did were those competitions where people created all manner of exciting elite specializations. This is the way I hate picking favorites, right? And you've just asked me to pick a favorite out of about 1 million things that could potentially be awesome. I think, as an Ellie main, I would probably find myself making a decent Elementalist elite specialization. The thing that makes me really sad about Ellie right now, though, is they stole 2 great concepts from future elite specializations and put them in a really crappy way with the Tempest. The Tempest, to me, I've grumbled about the Tempest a lot in recent videos. The Tempest, to me, it upsets me so. Not just because of its shoddy current implementation, in my opinion, and its lack of focus, but also because of the damage it does to the future elite specializations. You know what? I'd love to sit here and say to you, yeah, I would make an awesome storm-based elite specialization for the Elementalist. Or I would love to come to you and say, oh, I've got a really unique, bizarre concept, okay? I'm going to make like a sound-based mage. And I'm not talking about like a bard or a minstrel, you know, some kind of invigorating character. I'm talking about a sound, you know, like doing damage with sound. So I'm going to actually make an elite specialization for the Elementalist that uses the Warhorn. I'd love to come and say to you either of those things. I can't, all right? I can't even come to you and say, oh, I want to do a really cool aura-based elite specialization, because auras have always been interesting to me, but, you know, the Elementalist doesn't tap into them quite enough. I can't even say that. So many concepts have been stolen. What am I left with? I can't make an epic, explosive, storm-based guy. I guess I'll make a spell sword for the Ellie. I don't know, I just want an elite specialization for my main that I'm genuinely really excited and happy about. And then maybe second to that, I'd make like a Paragon for the Warrior. We discussed this on the stream recently. I actually think Paragon as an elite specialization hits Warrior better than it hits Guardian, just because of the color themes and the amount of magic involved. Because you're obviously balancing it with the themes of 2 core specializations at the same time. Or a Mesmer elite specialization. This is probably on the top of the list, actually. A Mesmer elite specialization that feels a lot more like the old Blackout, Diversion, Backfire, Empathy style Mesmer play, Wastrel's Worry style Mesmer play from Guild Wars 1, and maybe it would be fast casting themed, something like that. I think that'd be pretty interesting. Okay, and then the next question is from Christopher, who says, hey WP, I've always scratched my head about 3 very strange things Guild Wars 2 does. The first is the container within the container within the container within etc. From a design perspective, it makes sense under the hood to set up loot table system as tables within tables, and that gives designers a ton of flexibility and control. But why on earth actually expose that to the player as a part of the UX? Is it lazy implementation, or do you think that there's actually a benefit to that? Second, they seem incredibly inconsistent in their skill bar slot assignment for special items. When you equip stuff that changes or takes over your skill bar, the exit or other common functions are all over the place. Sometimes it's slot 5, sometimes it's 6, sometimes it's 10. Mostly this is seen with special interaction items, but even the Mesmer's Phantasm for the portal is in the wrong slot, 4 instead of 5. Once again, is this just lazy QA that different people are implementing these systems and never bothered to verify that it's consistent with previous features their colleagues implemented? Or is there an advantage that I'm completely overlooking? Lastly, World Boss nameplates and designations. Some have custom nameplates, the Golem, the Behemoth, Dragons, etc. Some are just champions like Frozen Moor. Shouldn't a World Boss be consistent? Well, and then finally he says, another thing that's inconsistent are enemies giving experience. I've noticed many events, even the new Heart of Thorns or even Fractals, where enemies don't give experience. Very weird when this happens. And if it's to prevent farming, that seems inconsistent a reason, given that COF farming still exists. Okay, so you've given me 4 topics here. I will try to roll through them so that we can get to the next question without spending too long here. First of all, Experience. Yes, it's inconsistent, but I believe that it's because ArenaNet learned lessons as the game went along. I always point this out when this topic comes up. If you go to the original live stream where they announced Tequatl, this was the first packs they did after the game came out. They were talking about LFG, they were talking about Tequatl. There is one of the devs on stage saying, I believe it was Crystal Reed, who's currently doing the raids, by the way. I'm pretty sure she says, all right, one thing we're doing, guys, is none of the mobs here drop loot and, as an extension, I guess, XP. As she said, the reason we've done this is so that everyone stays focused on the objective at hand. And that was hit with a raucous round of applause. People loved that. And I get the idea, and I still stand by that idea. So when I really care about killing the Chuck Gerrant, for example, back when Heart of Thorns came out and he was actually a bit of a struggle and we were learning the strategies and stuff, I had the confidence knowing that people weren't just trying to cheese the encounter out or, just killing the too many people were trying to kill the wave of Chuck running up the lane rather than doing the objective. Now, it's kind of ironic I say that because guess what did give experience? The Chuck running up the lane. So I believe that in principle, that's why they're now removing the experience from big events like that. The idea is everyone should be focused on actually defeating the encounter, and you put the rewards on the success of the encounter. What experience, what gold, what loot is lost from not getting it on the event mobs should be re-implemented on the final chest. So in the end, the player feels just as rewarded. It's just that we were actually focused on the objective at hand. I think that's the idea, and I think ArenaNet are inconsistent about it because they've only slowly come to the realization of that, and because there are always multiple parts of any event. So the Chuck Gerrant, for example, there's all kinds of things they probably did remove experience from. They probably removed experience and loot from the mobs that spawn around the spores at New Hawk, but then they didn't from the waves and stuff. And I think, yeah, it's probably just a lack of professionalism or difficulty in having a large, unwieldy product such as an MMO, and especially after the original stuff that they had at launch, you've got a question of, okay, we've got this new design idea. Are we just going to incorporate it into new content going forward? Or are we going to spend all this crazy amount of time changing everything we've already put in? And at some point, I don't think it's worthwhile going back to change everything you already put in. So then you got World Boss nameplates and designations. Funnily enough, I think you're right. I think that these should be a little bit more consistent. Funny enough, though, you guys might not realize there are different tiers of mobs. It goes like you've got a standard mob, then a veteran, then an epic mob, a champion. Actually, at the end of that chain, I believe they are called epic mobs. Epic, and that's the term for something like the fire elemental that has a nameplate that is like an image of some kind. Kind of cool. So then you got skill bars, and again, I think that this is just over time. The inconsistency creeps in because they find different ways of dealing with things. Yes, you might have a costume brawl outfit that gives you the exit button on the skill 6 because the costume brawl skills are all loaded into the left-hand side of the 5. But then you may have a tonic that has less skills and the tonic always had its exit on the 5 instead of the 6. And then maybe you've got something totally new where the devs are like, hold on, why don't we just use the drop bundle item? Isn't that the perfect solution? And then they end up doing that, and it's a question of they're slowly learning over time. Is it important to go all the way back when the stuff's functional? Probably not. And lastly, the container within a container within a container. Again, I believe this is probably oversights, but I think this container within a container within a container thing comes down to Arena have to do some really weird things, some really tricky things, and they really have to struggle when it comes to rewarding their players because their MMO is fundamentally different to other MMOs in that everyone gets loot when you tag something. And I know we're not talking about necessarily just champion bags and things here. You know, you look at Winter's Day, for example, it's just box and box and box and box and box. But all this stuff with the bouncy reward chests and the physical chests you get in the world, and then the physical chests give you items, which then give you just currencies, which you then buy for other stuff. All these complications, these all stem as creative and, funny little tricks that Arena have to employ because fundamentally, their game is different with the way they drop loot. They can't do the things that you see in World of Warcraft, and they can't do things you see in other fully persistent MMOs where the only guy to get the loot was the first one to hit it, or the last one to hit it, or the one to have done most damage. They have to do these tricks because you could potentially get a single mower in Queensdale dropping loot for 150 players all at once. And that kind of stuff makes the economy very funny. I don't fully understand the mechanisms involved, but I do believe a lot of Guild Wars 2's weird loot all stems from something as basic as that. Evan says, have you visited the huge partially developed area of Dragon's Stand? If you have, what do you think it's meant for? Was it something cut from Heart of Thorns, something from Living World Season 3, or something else entirely? I actually think 2 of those you've got bang on there. I believe, yes, it was something cut from Heart of Thorns, and I also believe that, yes, it will be something as a part of Living World Season 3. Guys, they obviously had a lot of problems with the end of Heart of Thorns. It was a complete repeat of the Ara story mode situation. Here we have the final map and cut-out areas of the final map. I definitely think that there was going to be a 4th path. I definitely think there was going to be a lot more explanation about the Duchess, who was mysteriously there in the final map. I even think... wait, did they confirm even that there was going to be another phase to the fight higher up in the tower? Obviously, a lot of stuff cut out, and I think the way that ArenaNet are going to fix and address that stuff is through Living World Season 3. So I think you're right on both of it. And yeah, I think it was just going to be integrated with the meta event. I don't know how they'll handle it with Living World Season 3. Wonderland, who says, why do you more lately consider Reddit subgroup commenters to be representative of the entire Guild Wars 2 community at large? My interpretation is that you use the community as backing for a prevailing Reddit point of view which aligns with your own. I hear this as the equivalent of American Fox News saying some people say to back up their agenda, and not a reputable source as journalism would expect. Do you think that knowing the real numbers from ArenaNet would provide more value to my assessments? And then Wonderland leaves another comment saying, oh, you're avoiding this question because I never made it last time, even though, you know, we only got through a certain amount. Yes, I completely agree with you here. I think that I do make the mistake of looking at the subreddit a little bit too closely as resembling most of the community. And I think that's the nature of the way that Reddit works. It's a dangerous thing and something that I should try to stop doing, and everyone using that website should try to stop doing. You tend to see stuff gets highly upvoted, and those upvotes represent lots of people, right? So whatever's high up there must be the prevailing community thought. Even within Reddit, that's wrong. One day you can see one sentiment has been highly upvoted, and then the next day a completely contradictory, even within that same week, a completely contradictory sentiment can be incredibly highly upvoted. And it really just comes down to the kind of users that are on at that time of day, and there is a huge mixed bag of opinions all over the place. But even then, yes, it's wrong to look at a single part of the community, or fan site, if you will. I don't know whether you can really consider it that, and extrapolate their opinions onto everything else. In a perfect world, I would read a lot more of the official forums. I would take into account a lot more of the opinions that are actually in-game. And to be honest with you, while the official forums and Reddit are largely negative, I don't see so much of that negativity in Guild Wars 2, so maybe we should look at that as a sign that maybe things aren't as bad as, you know, the very top end of the community are making out. And that's something very hard to grasp, and that's something very hard to even mention in videos too, I'll add, because just like we were talking about earlier with the world versus world thing, if there's a lot of negativity in the subreddit or on the official forums, and I go on and I hand wave and say, oh yeah, but you guys are just a small set of the community, it doesn't really help anyone, right? And that's the kind of thing that you can do to get people very angry. I would say that there's kind of a suggestion in your comment here that I come up with an idea, and then I'll just cherry pick, you know, specific threads that clearly don't mean anything to just try and justify what I think. That's really not true. I try to look at things as unbiased as I can. I know that may seem weird to people if your opinion consistently falls out of line with mine, but it is genuinely true. And quite often, I'll find I vehemently disagree with what the majority of other people are apparently saying. But more to the point, I think that while you have a valid comment here, that Reddit is just a small section of the community, there is still value in what people there are saying, and there is still value in what that subset of the community says, and it doesn't do us any good to ignore valid criticism, valid discussion, valid whatever, just because of that fact, right? You end the comment by saying, wouldn't it be better if ArenaNet gave us the actual stats? I think in many ways, yes, it would be, right? Like, so let's take an example here. On Reddit and the official forums, everyone is complaining that nobody ever uses the skill Glyph of Elemental Power, or Search and Rescue, right? Because it's got a big buff. The Search and Rescue got a buff and nobody uses it, and everybody's agreeing on it. Everyone is agreeing on it. But then maybe ArenaNet can come out with the stats and say, well, hold on, you guys might think that, but look at the stats. This skill sees way more use than any of the others. So, you know, these are the facts here. And then they can kind of counter some of this, right? Some of this maybe misplaced commentary. And that would be really cool, but they don't do that. And I think that's a slippery slope for them to go down. I'm just happy at least that they've got a known issue tracker and some of their communication policies seem to be changing a little. But yes, in an ideal world, I'd like more stats from ArenaNet. And if I have the choice, something official, something we actually factually know from the devs, or hearsay and speculation from a fan site, you can bet your ass I'm going to go with the information from the devs. I'm never going to cherry pick, the more questionable information on Reddit. I don't think you'll ever find an example of me doing that. The next question is from Hey Grandpa 19, who says, "Hey WP, how do you decide on the music you put in your videos? I get crazy nostalgic when I hear you use music from Twilight Princess, and it's fantastic." To be honest with you, I take credit here for, I've mentioned this many times, I take credit here for something that I really put very little effort into. A long time ago, about a year ago now, I went to YouTube, I typed in relaxing video game music. There was like a 4-hour video compilation someone had made. I downloaded it, I created an audio track out of it, and I dump that on the videos for music sometimes when I want something that's not just Guild Wars 2 music, and that's it. I try not to reuse too many sections of that 4-hour too frequently. I've got some other long tracks that I use, but really, a lot of the time, that nostalgia music and that cool music are coming from games I've never even played or specifically handpicked myself. This is not me, and it's been one of the better things I've ever done. I've had a couple of comments from people saying, "Wow, yeah, I found Wooden Potatoes and I stuck about for the cool music," and I've thought, that's pretty interesting since that was one of the easiest things I ever did. So yeah, no credit from me there. Usually if it's something I've hand chosen, it's where you're hearing that entire soundtrack. So like recently I've been using Stardew Valley soundtrack on the videos, and that's because I've been playing Stardew Valley and very much enjoyed it. But if it's a variety track, it's probably just something I've nabbed from somewhere else. And then the final question of this super Q&A is from Lindsay, who says, in terms of lore, is it possible that the magic used to learn the masteries was gained from the death of Zaitan? And wouldn't it take a number of years for people to notice the effect of the magic that had been released from his body? Best wishes, find and seek. So, I think this is an interesting idea, but I'm not really sure how magically inclined much of this mastery stuff is. And even if it were true, I've got to be honest, it's a cool idea, but I don't really think it affects the story in too many ways. I do want to see a lot more evidence of Zaitan and Elmodromoth's 2 body leaking magic out into the world, and both villains, as I've mentioned before, but also the players getting more power from it. And it would be nice if ArenaNet threw in like some kind of little subtle nod towards a theory like this, but I wouldn't be surprised if they don't at the same time. We'll see what the next batch of masteries they put out are going to be with future expansions, right? If they're much more magic heavy, then yeah, that'll be quite nice. But there you go, guys. That's the super Q&A for you. We've now exhausted all the questions. There is already over on Patreon another post where I'm collecting more questions from people. The second I get enough for another video, hopefully next week, I will roll out a bunch more. If you want guaranteed to have some discussion on any topic you like, feel free to drop a post over there. And if you are considering supporting, it means the world to me, especially in light of the negativity and sadness over the legendary weapons and the future expansions and stuff and the content drought. I've seen a lot of people just like leave. So, in the order of several hundreds of dollars. So if anybody is interested in helping out and would like some of these sweet perks as well, like access to the Google Drive, just a quick reminder for you there. But thanks very much, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think. I will be in the comments as ever, and see you next time. Have a good evening, guys.